I never thought I'd be the kind of woman telling this story. I believed in vows, in loyalty, in the kind of marriage that stood the test of time. For years, I built my life around my husband, Mark, and our 2 children. We had a beautiful home. In the suburbs, steady jobs, and a life many would call successful. But what no one tells you is how easily comfort can blur into complacency and how loneliness can grow in a house full of people. Mark and I weren't unhappy at first, but over time, our connection faded, eroded by long hours at the office, responsibilities and routines that left little room for affection. Our conversations became brief and practical. Our touches, rare. He was always working. I was always waiting. One day, standing in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Tired eyes, a worn body, a dull ache I couldn't name. I realized I had lost myself not just physically, but emotionally. So I joined a gym. Not for anyone else, for me. That's where I met Ethan. He was a personal trainer in his late 20s, kind, encouraging with an easy confidence that didn't feel intimidating. He approached me during my awkward first day and offered to help. I accepted. What began as simple workouts quickly became something more. Ethan was patient. He celebrated small victories. He listened. We'd talk about life, about struggles, about the aching silence in my marriage. He noticed things, my new shoes, my mood, the way I avoided eye contact when I felt low. Mark, meanwhile, hardly noticed anything at all anymore. As the weeks passed, I felt stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. Ethan helped me reclaim a version of myself I had long forgotten. Our conversations grew deeper. We started texting occasionally. It was innocent on the surface, but I knew deep down that I was stepping closer to an emotional edge. One rainy evening after a session, Ethan walked me to my car. The parking lot was quiet, the rain steady. I thanked him for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. He smiled and told me I had done the hard work. But there was a pause, long and full of something neither of us dared to name. I drove home that night with a storm in my chest. Back home, Mark remained distant, buried in deadlines. I tried to reach him, plan dinners, suggested weekend getaways, but every attempt met with excuses. Work, always work. I felt invisible in my own marriage, and the silence grew louder each day. One night, I approached him, needing more than his distracted nods. "Mark, can we talk?" I asked, gently resting a hand on his shoulder. Without even looking up from his screen, he muttered, "Can it wait? I have a call in 5. I stood there for a moment, the weight of years pressing on my chest. "It always has to wait, doesn't it?" I whispered, and left the room. That night, lying alone in bed, my thoughts drifted not just to Ethan, but to everything he represented: warmth, attention, presence, not love, not lust, but recognition. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered what it would feel like to be truly seen again. But Eastal loved my husband, or at least Thaman. He used to be. I didn't want to feel what I was feeling, but it was getting harder to fight it. The following week, after one of our sessions, Ethan suggested, "We grab a coffee. You've been working so hard, you deserve a little break," said with a charming smile. I hesitated, but agreed. Sat at a small cafe nearby, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Felt easy, natural, and comforting. First time in a long time, I felt seen, heard, and valued. We left the cafe. Ethan walked me to my car once again. As I opened my car door, he paused and looked into my eyes. "Rackle, I know this might sound wrong. Booty, need to be honest, I care about more than I probably should." My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounded. Ass. Looked back at him, torn between loyalty and longing. "Gethin, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything," he replied gently. "I just needed you to know." I sat in my car watching him walk away, feeling a storm of emotions inside me. I knew what wash opening. I knew I was dangerously close to betraying everything I had built with Mark. But I also knew that what Ethan made me feel was something I hadn't felt in years. The guilt ate at me, but the emotional pull was undeniably was trapped in a situation I never thought I would be in, and deep down I feared that it was only a matter of time for. I made a choice that could change everything. Turned into weeks, and every moment felt heavier than the last. I found myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, confusion, excitement, and fear every time. I saw Ethan at the gym. It tried to maintain a professional distance, but inside my feelings for him grew stronger. The way he smiled at meth, the way he listened, the way he simply made me feel alive again. It was becoming impossible to ignore home the tension between Mark and Mewis, thick and unspoken. Our conversation should become robotic, limited to the basic necessities of daily life. The few times I tried to bring up my feelings, Mark either dismissed them or brushed them aside with vague promises to make more time for us later, but later never came. His work continued to dominate his life, and I continued to drift further into emotional isolation. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I decided to confront them again. I couldn't keep carrying this weight alone. I set the table and waited for him to come home. When he finally walked through the door, greeted him with a smile, trying to seed a warm tone. "Hey honey, can we have an art together tonight? Just us?" I asked softly. Mark glanced at his phone. "I've got some emails to finish after dinner." "But sure, what's going on?" We sat down and ate in silence. For a few minutes, I gathered my courage and finally spoke. "Mark, I feel like we're growing apart. I miss us. I miss how we used to be." His sighed and rubbed his temples. "Rokel, I know things have been rough lately. Work's been overwhelming, but y'all know I'm doing this for us, for the kids. You work hard, but I need you too, Mark. I need us to be more than room-attaching a house." He looked at me, tired and distant. "I'll try, okay? Just give me Zoom time." His words were hollow like so many times before. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I felt defeated. That night, as we lay in bed, facing opposite directions, the silence between us screamed louder than any argument ever could. At the gym, Ethan could sense a change in me. One afternoon, after a long session, he approached me. As I wiped sweat from my brow, "You seem distant today," he said gently. I hesitated, unsure whether to pawn up again, but the words spilled out before I could stop the emits. "Mark, he says he'll try, but nothing changes. I feel like I'm fighting for this marriage." Alanathan listened, his eyes filled with genuine concern. "You deserve to be happy, Rachel Yotserv. To be seen, to be loved. Don't let Nyon make you feel like you don't matter." His words wrapped around me like a warm embrace. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Didn't want to cry, not here, not in front of him, but his kindness was breaking down my defenses. Over the next few days, our conversations shrewd deeper. We texted more frequent, ties late into the night. Ethan never pressured me, never crossed any boundaries. Physically, but emotionally we were far beyond where we should have been. On afternoon, after a particular lustrous argument with Mark over yet another day night, I found myself driving aimlessly without thinking. I pulled into the gym parking lot. It was late and I knew Ethan would still be there finishing his shift. When I walked in, held surprised, but quickly smiled. "Drakel, is everything okay? I didn't know where else to go," I whispered with a word. He led me to the small office at the back of the gym where we could talk privately. I sat down, my hands trembling. "Me can't do this anymore, Ethan. I feel like I'm disappearing." He sat across from, his eyes locking onto mine. "You don't thave to go through this alone, thave. Right?" His words were so gentle, so sincere. I nodded, tears finally escaping down my cheeks. He reached out and took me hand, holding it softly. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Thaleen, I had been so careful not to cross, was now nothing more than a faint Memorith emotional intimacy we shared was into new blight. We still hadn't done anything physical, but in many ways what we shared felt even more intense than thought is. I drove home that night, my heart pounded with guilt. I had emotional braid. My husband, even if no physical affair had occurred, I tried to justify it by telling Myself that Mark had pushed me to this point, but deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely fair in the weeks that followed. Mark remained as distant as ever. He seemed oblivious to my struggles to the growing void between us. I began noticing how often he would stay late at work or leave for sudden business trips. My suspicions grew. Though I tried to push them aside, maybe he was just busy. I told myself, but a small voice in my head whispered darker possibilities. Evening, I decided to confront my doubts. I checked his phone while he was in the shower, a violation of his privacy. I knew, but I couldn't help myself. I scrolled through his messages, Mistamac twisted. There were multi-plex conversions with a woman named Safiath. Vezes were casual but too frequent, too friendly, with subtle undertones that suggested far more than just friendship. My hands shook as I put the phone back. My heart was racing, my head spinning. Was Mark having an affair? Very thought made me sick, and yet Asmail part of me felt a strange sense of bitter irony here. I was emotionally involved with Ethan and now possibly betrayed by Mark in a different way. Next day, I confided in Ethan. I told him everything I had seen. I don't know what to do. I admitted I feel like I'm trapped in this horrible cyclothon's face was filled with empathy. You need to think about what's best for you, Rachel. You've been carrying this marriage on your shoulders for far too long. Words stayed with me for the first time. I began seriously questioning whether I wanted to save my marriage. At all was I holding? Because I loved Mark, or because I was afraid of what life without him would look like. Afternoon, after another sleepless night filled with anxiety, I sat down with Mark this time. I didn't ask for more time or more effort. I was done begging Mark. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. He looked up from his laptop, slightly annoyed. What is it, Rachel? Who is? Sophie, his face froze for a moment, but he quickly recovered. She's a colleague. Mark, I soft messages, don't lie to me. He sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead. Fine, we've been talking, but it's not what you think I felt. My throat tightened. Not what Ty think. Are you seeing her? He hesitated. It's complicated. No, Mark, it's not complicated either. You're faithful or you're not. He sat there silent, as if searching for the right words, but Nana Cam, that silence was my answer. I stood up, my heart breaking but oddly calm. I've been fighting for this marriage alone for a long time, Mark. I can't do it more without waiting for his response. I walked out of the room, tears streaming down my face's marriage. I had poured my heart into was crumbling, and I was finally ready to face the truth. After that conversation, everything changed. The house that once felt like a home now felt cold and empty. Mark tried half-heartedly to mend things, sending flowers, making empty promises, even suggesting counseling, but it was too late. The trust was broken, and I had no energy left to fight for something he had already given up on long before. I did. In the days that followed, I focused on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I continued my gym sessions, but now with a new clarity. Thin remained by my side, supportive but respectful of my situation. He never pressured me, never made any inappropriate moves, and for that I respected him. Even more. Thon came the moment that shifted everything. One morning, I received an anonymous message attached were photos of Mark and Sophie together. Intimated Nor's weekend getaways, all while he was supposedly working late or out off town. My stomach turned, not just because of his betrayal, but because of the sheer extent of his deception. I gathered the evidence and finally filed for divorce. Wasn't about revenge, it was about finally choosing peace for myself. Mark was stunned when I handed him Thepapors. He tried to bargain, tried to shift the blame, but his words fell flat. You're throwing away everything. Hest bitterly. No, Mark, I answered calmly. You threw it away long ago. I'm just finally letting go. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I made sure I secured my children's future and protected my financial interests. Mark lost much more than he expected, both emotionally and materialized. Relationship with Sophie didn't last long after the truth became public, and slowly he found himself more alone than ever imagined. While I flourished with a thin support, I not only regained my confidence, but rebuilt my entire life. It started a small business, found new hobbies, and discovered a version of myself. Sva had been lost forever eventually. Ethan and I allowed our friendship to grow into something more, but this time with patience, respect, and true care. It wasn't about filling a void anymore, it was about building something healthy, something real. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's simply finding happiness after the storm, and that's exactly what I did. Thanks for listening. Bye.